come on in. I'm Mary Davidson, and this is Our Community, and once again, the plot thickens. Our guest today is Sally Goldenbaum, and Sally is a mystery writer. Murder is her business, and she has written a really interesting book, and it's called The Moon Spinners. And I have to tell you, Sally, I'm hard to please because I love mysteries, and The Moon Spinners is a particularly good one. So I recommend it.
Thank you.
I had a wonderful time reading it, and it called me back. So when it calls me back to finish it, I know that it is a good book.
Wonderful to hear.
On page 3, and I say that because you did it right away. You set the stage and you introduced an air of mystery. Is it always on page 3?
Well, I never thought about that. I'll have to go back and check and see if it is. It should happen early, that's for sure.
Now, why? Why does it need to happen?
Well, because it is a mystery, and someone picking it up is expecting it to be a mystery. And I don't think it always does happen in mysteries, but I think it's a good thing when it does.
I do.
Sometimes you can get 40 pages into a mystery. My editors would not allow me to do that. They won't even let me go too long without killing someone. So,
no kidding.
It happens soon.
Well, it's better sooner than later, Sally.
That's right.
Now, on page 4, I have to shoot an I read this book, Sally. I have to shoot an accusation. You see, in Sally's other life, I have to tell you, Sally was a writer of romance novels, and that's how I first met you. And
right.
I detect on page 4 a smell of your other life. And as we move on, all the knitters have a husband, a lover, except Bertie, who's had 4 husbands, and but she retains the memory of her first husband. Very romantic, very romantic. It's important. Is it important, or is it important to you to have all those main characters hooked up?
I didn't intend to do that. I wrote another series before this called The Queen Bee Quilters. It was a mystery series set in Kansas. And I realized after I finished that I didn't pay much attention to men. So in this new series, I decided I wanted to do that, not necessarily in a romantic way.
Or to make them the prime character.
Or to make them,
I see.
Right. But I did, one of the knitters is my age, and she has a living husband, and I wanted to explore that. In addition to being mysteries, I find that these books are a wonderful avenue for exploring friendships, for exploring relationships, for exploring life in a small town and things that happen in secrets.
So, Sally, they are a study in sociology.
I think so. I hope so.
I think so.
I hope that's what readers take away.
I think so. I do. I do. On pages 7, 8, 9.
Oh my goodness. How many pages are there left? 305,
That's
I
right.
believe.
We're going through each minute page.
This is like defending your doctoral thesis.
The reason I say that is because it's important that it's on pages 7, 8, 9. Immediately, all the characters are introduced very quickly, see. And do you choose to get them out there and go, or is this something that needs to be done? And how do you decide how to do it so it isn't like a Russian novel where you can't get them all figured out?
That's actually difficult. And in this one, they're all at a party, so there are lots and lots of people there. This is the 3rd book in the series, so.
But I haven't read the other 2, see.
And I hope you were able to figure out who they were, because it's a standalone, but it's difficult to, since I've already described these people in books 1 and 2, some of them, you know, I don't want to bore readers who have read the first 2.
But you have to make it easy for us.
But you have to make it easy, and that's the job of a wonderful editor too. And in this book, she did come back and say, you need to at least put a little descriptive after so-and-so's name, and so he owns a bakery, he owns a bookstore.
And you did do that.
So I
But you didn't make it ponderous. In other words, you're Goldenbaum and not Tolstoy.
Yes.
See,
that's true.
because in these Russian novels, I mean, they just come from all
They're
directions,
all
and you
over.
think, who is that?
And you need these charts.
Yeah, you need a chart. And I was very pleased, and so that's why I made note of the page, because it comes quickly.
Well, that's good to hear that that you were able to.
Oh, I was
keep
able.
them
Yes.
straight. I am going to put all of the people on my website, just because sometimes readers email me that they do get a little confused, especially if there's a period between books.
Well, yeah, and you forget.
You forget, sure.
Because those of us who like to read books in between.
That's right.
See, and so you do forget.
You forget.
So a little memory refresher is always good.
It's always good.
That's right.
I mean, I forget what I did yesterday, so.
And the reason I'm making note of these pages is that certain things happen pretty quickly in a mystery in order to hold my attention, or whoever the reader may be. So we move to page 10. Now, this is kind of interesting because Alfonso, who is one of the lead characters in this book, he looks at his wife, Sophia, who is the victim in this thing, and little events happen that are put in by a skillful writer to confuse the reader. And when he says, you make note of the fact that when he looks at her, his expression changes. See? And I thought, she's going to get me here very soon. and so I think those are skillful little bits that are put in at the right time to say, oh, is he going to get murdered? Is she going to get murdered?
Make you...
To make me think that he may be the murderer. Yeah, or she may be a murderer. Neither of which is true.
And sometimes those are added later.
Are they?
They
so
are.
So they're not always done as you write?
It depends on how much I know when I start the book.
Know about what?
Oh, who the murderer is, for example.
Oh, that's an important point.
That's important. And in this book, I did know who did it.
Okay.
In the second book in this series, I knew who did it as well, but I finished the whole book, sent it to my editor, and she said, I love this story, except the wrong person did it.
Really? It wasn't the butler?
It wasn't the butler. It was Mr. What are their names? Mr. Green. So I had to go back. She said, I want you to leave it the way it is, but go back and add what you need to make somebody else the murderer. And I said, well, do you have a clue who the murderer is? And she didn't. She said,
yeah,
no.
But you know, that direction is not as easily done as it is said. Because in changing the murderer, you have to go way back and change the events leading up to the murder and the events after the murder so that you don't get your accent on the wrong syllable.
And you always have to be fair to the readers, so you can't throw something at them that doesn't come naturally. But this editor was absolutely right, and the book is much better because she had me do that.
Yeah. Well, and I think that you have to catch them early on because your plot immediately begins to thicken as you introduce another rock in the road, if you will, and that is the marriage of Gracie and Joey, because we have a family feud going on.
That's right, the Hatfields and the McCoys.
That's right. And so that, again, you see, throws something in front of me to say, oh, I thought I had this all figured out on page 10, and here it is, page 12, and I don't have it figured out. So you keep me interested. I think that's the point.
That's good to hear. Yeah, I don't always think about that when I'm doing it, but to hear you say
really
that is very helpful.
You don't think about that?
I think about holding the reader's interest. I'm not always sure how to do that. You always like to end a chapter with the reader wanting to go on to the next one, of course.
Well, that's right. See, and I think that you introduce another suspect, and that's Julianne.
Yes,
and
she is
her. I did too. She's Alfonso's sister, and the conversation that's overheard, she said, she's stealing from us. I wish she'd disappear from our lives forever. And then I think, oh, she's a murderer.
And a lot of people thought that.
Yeah, she's not.
And she.
So how many, the question then becomes, how many false positives do you put in the way as the reader chugs toward this murder and ultimately the solution and the killer and the...
You know, you have to have at least 3 or 4. That was another good editing suggestion in that book, though. The editor said I had so many suspects that almost anyone you'd pass walking down the street could have killed this woman. And she said, I don't think you need quite so many. And that was a relief to me, because it's hard to make all these people look guilty.
Well, it does, but you also need some angelic characters that are the sleuths, too.
That's true.
So you can't make everybody a poop in this thing. You have to, you know.
And without it ruining anything, my 4 knitters will never be a murderer, will never be one of the murderers.
Well, you like them too much.
I like them too much. They're my friends, and...
do you get to thinking about them as real people?
I do. I do. I sometimes, on the way out here, I was thinking about the next book, and I sometimes ask them to help me a little bit.
Which of the 4 do you like the best?
Well, I like all of them for different reasons. I have a age span, as you detected.
Yes, Birdie's the oldest, so let's start with her. Why do you like Birdie?
I love Birdie. Birdie was inspired by a very dear friend of mine, my mentor in college, who is actually a nun. Although there's a big difference, clearly Birdie had 4 husbands, and my dear friend. But I see her as witty and wise and kind, and which are all the things my friend was. My friend marched at Selma. She was that kind of a person. She was the best teacher I ever had in my life.
What a nice tribute.
So that's my Birdie, with lots of differences. Nell,
she's the next oldest.
Nell is the next oldest, in her 60s.
And she's the aunt of one of those, we need to say.
Right.
Okay.
And she's the one I probably identify with the most, not because we're a lot of like. Many times she does things I wish I could do or had done. Yeah. She says what so she's a better version of me, maybe. Her niece, Izzy, is in her 30s, and I have a daughter in my 30s who actually lives on Cape Ann, which is where the book takes place, on Cape Ann, Massachusetts. Yeah. It's where The Perfect Storm was filmed, if you know that area north of Boston. My daughter lived in Boston for a long time, as Izzy did, and then Izzy moved up to Cape Ann, as my daughter did. So there's a connection there.
And the youngest of the knitters?
Izzy is the youngest, and then the next one is Cass Halloran, who
but Cass is
a little bit older than Izzy.
Izzy, okay.
And
Cass is not married.
She isn't.
But she has a boyfriend.
But she does. She does.
Yeah.
Well, sort of. We don't know how that's going to go. You think it's going to work out?
Oh, yes, Sally.
And Danny Branley, her boyfriend, was inspired by a young man I met in New York who works for Barnes & Noble, and Dan is a wonderful man. He buys, he's the mystery person for Barnes & Noble, and he's a knitter, but he never learned to purl. And I just had to put that in a book. So funny. My Danny in the book is a knitter who can't purl. But Cass is a lobster woman, and she was kind of inspired by a real lobster woman who also writes mysteries. Linda Greenlaw is her name. And she's written several mysteries, a lot of books. She's written a lot of books about fishing because that's her profession. And she fishes for lobster.
It seems to me that it is extremely important to develop those main characters so they become not only real to you, but it's more important that they become real to me.
And I hope I've achieved that. I actually wrote long essays about the mystery readers, the quilters. I mean the knitters. Excuse me, I'm getting my books mixed up. I wrote long essays just for me.
Which came first, the characters or the plot of the first book? The characters.
Mm-hmm.
So you decided you were going to have a certain group of those 4.
That's right.
And then the others come along. Okay.
Exactly.
And I think to establish a recognizable group lends itself well to a series.
It does.
Yeah.
And they have to be people you like, or you'll get tired writing about them.
That's true. You think, oh, I don't want to see you anymore.
That's right.
But you
Go
know,
on a vacation.
You have some really kind of interesting little things in there, and one of them is Pearl the cat. But Pearl is P-U-R-L,
right,
like knit and purl, and I think those are.
You're a very discriminating reader.
To me that's kind of fun to pull out those kind of things, and I think that those kinds of things. Names are extremely important because that made me smile.
They are.
I thought that was. I thought to myself, that's good. That's clever. I like that. And but I want to come to a subject that I found extremely interesting. They eat and eat and eat and eat.
They do. They eat a lot.
They do.
But they exercise too.
That's right.
They run along the beach.
I thought, boy, if I ate like that and everything tasted, looks so good and sounds so good, I think I weigh 500 pounds.
Even Birdie rides a bike.
Yeah, they do. But does that is that the glue that, why did you do that?
Well, the knitting really is the glue that holds it together, and that's how the publisher markets this book. They call it a knitting mystery. Now, you won't learn to knit by reading it.
No, but there's a pattern that you can send for.
But exactly.
Yeah.
And the yarn is a wonderful sensuous kind of element
and
that I think adds to the book.
And you talk about that, the soft yarn, the colors of the yarn, the different kinds.
Exactly.
Yes, you do. You talked about a sweater that was knit out of cotton and it was soft and I thought that was.
And that's a part of knitting that's just so wonderful. The textures, the cooking is strictly because I love to cook, and I think it's a wonderful thing to add into this group of women who get together over knitting. But Birdie brings wine and Nell brings
it's a community
food
effort, and it knits. Not only it knits the book, it knits their friendship.
It does. It does.
And that's but I think there's a little bit of you in each one of them.
Oh, well, that's nice to hear.
Well, I do. I do.
I hope it's the good parts.
Well, we'll hope on that. It took to page 89. See, to me, it's important to see how long it takes you to do these things. On page 89, the knitters are committing. Now, the murder's been done.
Yes.
And they are committing an effort to find the killer.
Exactly.
It took them to page 89 because she was already murdered. Sophia was deader than a doornail.
And maybe that could have happened a little sooner because they do have to commit to it.
They do have to commit
That's what the book is about.
Yeah.
And in order to commit to it, there has to be a connection. They're not going to commit to help solve a murder that happened to two people they don't have any interest in.
Exactly.
So in this one, Gracie and her mother are there. They love those two people, so they're going to help solve this.
They're going to help. A pregnancy drops in there. That's a real bombshell. And we're not going to talk too much because I don't want to ruin that for the people that but the pregnancy is a major bombshell.
And I had no idea that was going to happen. They did that on their own.
Oh, did they? Yes. I was going to say it was a surprise to everybody.
It was a surprise.
And the family feud, that runs clear through the book.
Uh-huh.
But the real test, says I, as a mystery aficionado, is to follow the money.
Aha.
Yes.
And did you?
I did.
And where did it lead you?
Oh, I'm not going to tell you.
Okay.
We don't want to give that plot away.
That's right.
I don't want to do that.
Right.
But I would like for you to talk about the legend. It calls Moon Spinners.
Yes.
And I'd like for you to talk about the legend of the Moon Spinners. Why did you call it that?
Well, I usually brainstorm titles with my editor and my agent. I'm not real good at coming up with titles. This title actually came from one of them. I can't remember if it was the agent or the editor. And I protested at first because I had read Mary Stewart's book, Moon Spinners, years and years and years ago. And they're too young, my agent and my editor, to have remembered that book, so they didn't even know there was another book. It doesn't really matter, you can't copyright titles, but I kind of had an uncomfortable feeling about it.
Yeah.
Also, it didn't have a whole lot to do with the story. So, and I had just, I was in maybe, I had written a quarter of the book when we came up with the title. so I went back and I thought about I researched the legend of the moon spinners, and I loved it. And it had everything to do with knitting, and they didn't even know that when they suggested it.
Just in a kind of a nutshell.
It's an old Celtic myth, and it's a story about a group of knitters who go down to the shore and they spin the light of the moon onto their distaffs until the moon is gone. It's a myth that tells the story of the cycle of the moon. Then they go back and they knit sweaters out of the moon-spun yarn. When the sweaters are dirty, they take them back to the ocean, they wash them, and the light goes back up to the moon until it forms a perfect circle again. And they're knitters, and the woman in the book dies on a full moon night. So it was easy. It was a wonderful title for.
But see, isn't that interesting? Because I think it makes the book so much more interesting to know that, because life is a circle.
It
really.
is. It is.
And this book is a circle.
Yes.
And I think that's a beautiful story. I do.
And it fits. Now, don't you think?
Oh,
yes.
I do.
Yes.
I absolutely do. The title of the first in this series was what?
Death by Cashmere.
That's right.
And that was an interesting situation. I called it If Lobsters Could Talk, because, and I thought I'd finally come up with a good title. The woman falls off a breakwater and her hair gets caught in a lobster trap and she dies. So to me it fit. If lobsters could talk, they would tell us who killed her. They didn't think it was very appealing. And so my editor came up with Death by Cashmere. Well, there wasn't anything in the book about cashmere.
So you had to put something.
So I did, and it turned out to be one of the major clues in solving the murder.
Well, you know, I do want to talk about the victim here. Sophia is the victim. And the way she was murdered was she was driving a Ferrari, no less, that belonged to her husband, Alfonso, and she boom, went off the side of the cliff. And you talked about some kind of particular kind of brakes, and I can't remember that. What kind of brakes?
Brembo or
something?
Bembo,
I don't
something
know,
like
but
that.
they were particular kind of brakes. But I think the method to the murder, I want to talk about that. How you kill off your victim. How do you decide to do that?
That's probably one of the easier things to come up with, because it needs to be kind of dramatic, but it doesn't always play a huge role in the story. I mean, she could have easily been pushed off a cliff or something else. This fit, that method fit, because her car was in a parking lot where someone would have had access to it.
But it had to be someone who knew about those brakes.
Right, that's right. And so that research came as I was writing the book. I actually emailed the Car Talk guys on NPR.
Did you really?
And one of their producers was charming, and he wrote me back and he said, you know, we can't really get involved in helping
They were
you
afraid you'd do
tamper
it, so.
brakes. But they said, go to our website and join this discussion, and they told me which one. They said, we have really, really smart car aficionados, and they'll help you. So I threw the question out there, and these guys were very humorous, and they gave me lots of ways.
I think that's funny. They thought you might try it.
In retrospect, I thought, of course, I should never have asked them that. They couldn't help me murder someone.
That's right. But so the method for the murder is not that's the least of your problems.
It actually is. It always features in the first book. It's real important to how she dies when she falls off. She's a really good swimmer, so if she fell off a breakwater, she wouldn't just die. She'd be able to swim fast.
Well, and the other thing is, you made a point of noting that she was a very slow driver in this very fast car.
And that I had to go back and add that, because it made more sense that way. It made them think something went wrong here.
Well, yeah, because she was seen, one of the husbands, I forgot which one, was taking pictures or diving.
He was scuba diving and taking underwater pictures.
And he saw this car careening down the hill, and it was a bright yellow Ferrari. You can't miss it. So he saw this, and then all of a sudden it came off of the cliff. So the die was cast.
That's right. That's right.
So I thought that was funny. You have written a lot of books and of late mystery. Do you have a character in any of your books that is near and dear to your heart, that you would pick as your favorite?
I don't think so. I think in the knitting mysteries, I love them all equally. And the series before this was a group of quilters, and there was a kind of a counterpart to Nell, who's in this book, and a counterpart to Izzy. Her name was Kate. And I did become very fond of all of them. So I don't think I could pick one.
Is it hard to dream up the characters?
That's the really fun part. I love dreaming up characters and place. I would say are my strong points.
You know, one thing you didn't put in this book, and I wondered why, was, and you know, Cape Ann, and there's a big Coast Guard installation up there. In your next book, you'll have to put the Coast Guard in.
Now, is that Cape Ann or Cape Cod?
They're at Cape May, actually.
Oh, so that's up in Maine, right?
Yeah, but it's not too far.
It's not too far.
I mean, we're writing fiction here, Sally.
That's right. The Coast Guard would be an excellent.
Yes. So no extra charge for the thought.
Well, thank you. I'll be sure to acknowledge you.
Yes, well, thank you. It wouldn't hurt, but you know. But I just think the detail is so important. Is that a hard part?
I love doing that. The detail, having people feel the yarn, having people smell the ocean. Alexander McCall Smith, who writes the #1 Ladies Detective, he was gracious enough to read the book and give me a quote for the first book. He said, you can smell the seaweed. And I loved that. That's what I tried so hard to do.
That's what you're aiming for.
It is.
And you're aiming to make me a part of the lives of the people that are so important to you in this book.
Yes, I am.
And I really did feel that way. And you know, they're all good cooks. So we can go to your website and get some of, is it Nell's recipes?
Nell's recipes.
Yes.
And my son is my webmaster, and we hope he's putting up a new website this weekend that will have that. I said in this book that they were up there, and they're not, and I can't tell you how many letters I've gotten from, emails I've gotten from people.
And there's also a pattern for the, what is it, the Dead Fish Band?
The Dead Fish hats, yes.
Yes, and so you have a hat that folks can knit on your, it'll be on your website very shortly.
Be, and the picture.
But see, I think that's important because, not only just because it's recipes and a hat, but because it tends to keep people attached to the...
Yes. And they do. I just got an email yesterday. A woman already has finished this fish hat and sent me a picture of it.
Had you seen the hat before?
I had seen a picture of it. The designer sent me a picture. A wonderful woman in Denmark. Isn't email and the website?
What did we do with that?
What did we do without it?
I don't know.
But this was a reader also sent me one, and it's beautiful. A reader also, in the first book, there's a shawl, a beautiful shawl made out of sea silk yarn, and a reader knit it for me and sent me pictures.
I think that's lovely. Did you ever make a mistake?
And I hear about them, especially from those New Englanders.
Is it a mistake in the surroundings?
One was, I called a pier, Pelican Pier in Sea Harbor, and a reader said, there are no pelicans this far north. They're in Florida, as smart people are who don't like the cold. So what I did in that case, I researched it, and I found there was a sighting of a brown pelican about 20 years ago in this area. So I had Bertie, her husband, donated the pier, and he was the one who sighted the brown pelican.
And it's the Brown Pelican Pier.
And so he named it as a joke.
And it was in this book, too. You repeated it.
I repeat the story in this book.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
But there are some other, you don't call grocery sacks in New England. You call them bags. And I've gotten a lot of emails about that.
Well, and I have to say, though, that your knitters do pick up all of the drop stitches, and the mystery is finally solved. And as I say, thank you so much to Sally Goldenbaum for being our guest and to all of you for being with us. I would say, I'd like to end with a quote, "With all the dexterity and warmth the women of Sea Harbor knit into their sweaters and shawls, Sally Goldenbaum weaves us a tale that combines friendship, community, and crime." Jillian Roberts said that about you, and I think it is all too true.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sally.
Mary.
Thank you for letting me introduce you to one of the neighbors in our community. Thanks for being with us. Thank you, Sally.
Thank you.